My name is Chris Sainer. For more than 2 years, I have been shooting footage, doing research, collecting data, and basically documenting the whole process of the Lake Me-Me-Sagamesing Fish Hatchery program. This includes gathering previously shot footage by a number of people from over the years. There are also literally hundreds of photographs that have been put into a collection. This collection is kept at the pond and can be viewed anytime or during any of the pond's functions the group holds every year. What you're about to watch is my interpretation of everything I've learned over the years and tried to document. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Mission Statement. The Lake Me-Me-Sagamesing Fish Hatchery is owned and operated by the Lake Me-Me-Sagamesing Pickerel Hatchery Group, under the authorization of the Ministry of Natural Resources. It is a non-profit organization financed through grants from the Ministry, contributions from those who appreciate the lake, and various fundraising efforts by the group. All expertise and labor is on a voluntary, no-wage basis. The aim and desire of the group is the propagation of pickerel in the lake through the reclamation of spawning beds, enhancement of water quality, collecting and hatching of spawn under controlled conditions, release of hatched fry to predetermined spawning beds on the lake, and lastly, raising hatched fry in the hatchery pond to fingerling stage for release into the lake. The hatchery, located at Little Portage Camp, can be viewed by contacting Johnny Matthews at 705-757-5427. In order to continue the Pickerel Enhancement Program, financial assistance is appreciated. Please help support this very worthwhile program. Sincerely, the management staff.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is now 1 o'clock. We start the countdown for the Derby, starting at 10 to 0. When I say 0, everybody casts their line in. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Go!
Every year, the Catfish Derby is held at the Pickerel Pond as one of the fundraising highlights sponsored by the hatchery. Many people who return each year enjoy this annual event. This would include local residents, cottagers of the lake, as well as many tourists that specifically book their vacation so it coincides with this event. Over the years, I thought about documenting the Catfish Derby and everything that's related to it. Walking around the day of the Derby, I wondered how many people know the true reason the Catfish Derby is put on every year. I'm sure they know that it's a fundraising event for the pickerel program, but do they really know what kind of effort is put into it and how many people actually volunteer their time for the lake? I asked several people why they were there. I got a lot of different answers, such as for the food, socializing with friends, the $100 catfish, and of course the most popular answer with the kids,
win prizes! With my purple monkey, which I won! Woohoo!
So what exactly is the fundraiser for? Where does the money go? And why do we need the fundraiser? That's the big question. Why? Lake Me-Me-Sagamesing, Saug Lake for short, is in central Ontario and is located between North Bay and Sudbury. The name is rumored to mean Lake of Many Bays. It has, however, been documented by various government survey maps and surveyors' notes that Lake Me-Me-Sagamesing was not the original name of the lake. In 1850, a surveyor by the name of S. Bray has the lake on his survey map labeled as Lake Wakikamagong, and the Me-Me-Sagamesing River labeled as River Me-Me-Sagamesiki. In 1853, J.S. Dennis describes in his surveyor notes that he crossed a lake and then camped on the river Me-Me-Sagamesiki. In 1877, Edgar Bray's survey notes describe the makeup of the lake and calls the lake Me-Me-Sagamesing. In 1908, John Shaw's survey of the lake calls the lake Me-Me-Sagamesing. So how do you get to Saug Lake? From Toronto, take Highway 400 north to Barrie. Just north of Barrie, the 400 turns into Highway 11. Follow Highway 11 north towards North Bay, to the Trout Creek Cutoff, where you will take the 522 west. When you get to Loring, you will come to a stop sign, which is known as the Four Corners. Instead of following the 522 to the left, take the road straight through the stop sign. This is a gravel road known as the North Road that will lead you right to Saug Lake. Saug Lake has a distinctive look and has a north and south side connected by what is called the Narrows or the Channel. The northern shore of the lake is Dokeese Indian Reserve. The west, south, and east, along with the islands, are a combination of private and crown land. It's a small lake with about 120 cottagers and year-round residences. The lake has several tourist camps, for which the location is perfect for vacationers. When the lake was settled, there was plenty of fish for many years. These fish included, and still include, large and smallmouth bass, northern pike, lake trout, catfish, whitefish, and walleye, otherwise known as pickerel. The pickerel is pursued in Ontario as both a sport fish and a commercial fish. Surveys show that pickerel is first in importance for anglers, and second in anglers' observed catches. In plain English, pickerel is the number one fish anglers go for, and second in overall fish caught. But in the late 1950s and early 60s, there was a noticeable decline in the pickerel population, and in 1968, a temporary hatchery was set up at Pakula for pickerel restocking. The equipment used was crude, but had some success for the rehabilitation of pickerel in the lake.
But if the question was, why are we still doing what we're doing, and why did we start? The question was, in the late 60s, or in 1959, prior to even my dad's demise, it was obvious that the pickerel fishing was in jeopardy. We were just like, it was not there anymore. So, and that's when Paul Tippino, myself, and actually Foster Boyce was involved in that too. And it was with ministry permission that Paul and I put together a makeshift. It was made out of plywood with the bell jars that Paul acquired from the ministry. And it was set up over on his dock over at Pakula, right out in the open sunlight. And he hooked up a water heater to heat the water up, and we brought them to the eye-up stage, and we actually just took them out on the lake, and it was with a flower sifter. We would just pick them up, and we would broadcast them out on the stones around the perimeter with no special areas in mind, because we didn't know what special areas other than just rocky areas. So, and that went on for about 3 years. Billy was just, we had pictures of Billy. He was only, 4 years old, 5 years old. And we had pictures of him on the dock when we were processing the fish. It was working because we were catching fish, but the reason we stopped, there was absolutely no, first of all, moral support. That's before the subdivisions were on the lake, and there was no people there, and there was no money available. And it cost Paul and myself a little bit of money to get this thing started. But anyways, we lost our enthusiasm, I guess you might say, and so we discontinued.
After discontinuing this short program, the following year showed a good rise in the pickerel population, and then returned to a steady decline. By 1982, the pickerel population depleted to almost nil. That same year, a man named Alan Pope, who was the Minister of Natural Resources at the time, opened the doors for private participation for hatcheries in Ontario.
So in 1982, when Alan Pope, this man called Alan Pope, became Minister of Natural Resources, I think he was a Northern Ontario boy, because he sure had the love of the country at heart. He established a program called the Community Fisheries Involvement Program. It was called CFIP for short. And this meant that any interested groups in the fisheries division of Northern Ontario that wanted to not only start a hatchery, but fish rehabilitation, spawning beds, covered the whole range of fisheries involvement. And this meant that we had to volunteer our labor, but the government would sponsor material costs. For example, some of the jars that we bought for the hatchery were sponsored. Some were given to us prior to that. After a period of time, they sponsored probably 75 or 50 to 75% of all the rock rubble that we use for spawning rehab. We would apply for a grant. First of all, we'd apply for a grant for, say, and I don't remember the figures, 2 or 3 truckloads of stone, and they would pay half of that, and our hatchery would pay the other half. And this was all made by donations. They didn't pay for our building, but they paid for nets and material used. They would pay a certain percentage of the gas. But this was all through the CFIP program. And if I was to go back in the books, the amount of money, people keep saying, what does the government do with all the fishing license money? And I says, well, you know what? Really, we have really gotten our lion's share of the fishing license money on Lake Me-Me-Sagamesing, because they have given us a lot of money over the years to do what had to get done, and the money's still available, but due to the fact that we're almost self-supporting, and we are self-supporting with all the fundraisers we have, that we don't participate in the CFIP grants anymore, but they are still available for ongoing programs. If indeed we wanted to make another spawning bed, I'm sure that the ministry would be more than willing to help sponsor that.
That's when Johnny Matthews heard of a hatchery started by Hartley Moore.
After the 1982 opening of the doors by this Alan Pope, Hartley Moore was very involved and got involved, and he started the first hatchery in the Argyle community programs. He's also a tourist operator out of Port Loring. So he put together a group of volunteers to the same program as I am talking about now, and opened up a hatchery at his place down on Lake Wilson, Minnehaha Camp. And we set up in his boathouse. It was crewed just like everything else.
Johnny asked if he could incubate some eggs at Hartley's hatchery on behalf of Saug Lake. He did this for 2 years with moderate success.
We caught our fish up here on Saug, and I don't remember, it was a jug full, but I probably only 1 jar full. I don't really remember how many it was, but I do remember at our first attempt at fertilizing the eggs, and then me taking them out to Hartley, so proud of us taking out this big jug full of eggs, but most of them are white. I said, Hartley, what's with all these white eggs? He says, well, tell you the truth, Johnny, they're all dead. You know what I mean, eh? Like, this was our first kick at the cat, the thing after we fertilized them back when Paul and I did it, but that was quite a while later, you know, before, and I'd forgotten all about it, or how to do it, and all kinds of bad stuff. So anyways, we did get a lot of fry out of those jars, or out of that tub of eggs. So that was the first year. The second year we did the same thing, and we learned as we went along. For heaven's sakes, you always learn. You've got to make mistakes to learn.
This program by Hartley Moore motivated Little Portage camp owner Johnny Matthews to start a new private hatchery program of his own in hopes to attract more tourists and fishermen to the lake and the businesses. In 1984, they applied for and received a license from the Ministry of Natural Resources to harvest 1 million eggs. Johnny used a 2-man fish shack as a hatchery, with 2 jars running into 1 container, with all the fry coming out into that 1 container. When they hatched unexpectedly, it was about 480,000 fry into 1 trough, which ended up plugging the screens. Because Johnny was out in North Bay at the time, Dave Weber was left to deal with the emergency. This was the start of a lot of trial and error that eventually evolved to what it is now, a very successful program.
And then in 1984, we started with our own 2 jars. And that goes back to that 2-man fish shack that we had. And the one compartment, it was also a homemade outfit. It wasn't up to spec, that's for sure. And we also built the pond in 1984. So that started that part. From the 2-man fish shack, we then got some scaffolding for the next year. We moved into the boathouse at the camp. And we had the scaffolding, and by that time, our jars, or our pictures of are in the album there, where we have the scaffolding set up and the big header box up on top. And we incubated in the boathouse for a couple of years, 3 years. And then that's when we built the new hatchery building on the south side of the lake. And that's when it really got sophisticated. We still had the wooden containers at the back, and we still had the wooden header on top, and we still had the 2 glass jars, but then we started buying plexiglass jars, and we ended up with 6 jars finally. And then we replaced the 2 glass jars with all 6. We've got 2 more plexiglass jars. There was a guy in North Bay that made all the acrylics. Then as time progressed, we replaced the header boxes at the back with acrylic boxes that were, this is up to sanitary. Judy was always worried about fungus, and rightfully so. They would build up on a slime, and in the manuals they always stressed, you know, sanitation, cleanliness and gentleness is important. So we got the acrylic boxes, and then that brand new header box up on top. So that meant the whole system was acrylic. It was sanitary. It was easy to clean and easy to keep clean. So that was a good thing.
Program Essentials. There are basically 3 main areas that the program has concentrated on over the last 25 years. The hatchery, the pond, and the spawning beds. These 3 elements are essential to the overall goal and success of the program. The hatchery is needed for the actual spawning process and incubation of the eggs until they are hatched. The pond is needed to raise the hatched fry to fingerling size to be released into the lake. And the spawning beds are needed for the pickerel in the lake to spawn and to eventually become self-sustaining. This is the eventual goal of the program, to get to the point where the pickerel on the lake can be self-sustaining. The hatchery. The hatchery is located at Little Portage Camp and is where the spawning takes place, as well as where the eggs are incubated until hatch. The main components of the hatchery as you walk in the door are as follows. The incubation system, which includes the jars and the holding tanks. The spawning table, which includes the stainless steel mixing bowl. 2 tubs, pink and blue. The jar rolling table. A small dining table. The pickerel age and size display. A wood stove. The communications center, which includes the communications radio. The mixing station, for mixing the gray fuller's earth. A water heater. And finally, the alarm system. Hatchery preparation.
As winter comes and goes, as you close up shop the fall before, or the spring before, you put everything away, and then come spring, everything is clean. All you have to do is hook up the water, get the water running, make sure there's no leaks, and you start the water flowing through the jars prior to even starting to collect the fish and the spawn. So I usually hook the water up about a week before we go out fishing, which is almost like the day the ice goes out, because our water system is just 2 sump pumps, one on the north side and one on the south side. The reason is when the wind blows from the north side, it riles up the bottom of the lake, and there's a lot of sediment goes through the system. So we have a switching system that if the wind blows from the north, we go to the south pump, blows from the south to go to the north pump. Anyway, so we do have everything up and going about 7 days before we go to catch fish.
It takes about 2 hours in total to get the hatchery up and running, spread out over the course of the whole day, providing there are no extra surprises. First, you have to get the lines in the water. Then the filters have to be cleaned. And the sub pump up and running. The system's microscreen is then installed.
This is the micro screen, and it only takes out the coarse particles, and that's all we're concerned about, as long as we filter before the water hits the upper tank. So this has to be changed sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, depending on the wind and how much it riles up the lake surface.
Before the water is turned on, all the taps are closed. Then you start filling the holding tank, stopping once in a while to clean the filter from the dirt that's been built up in the lines. The lines have to be flushed several times in order to get all the dirt out. Once the lines have been cleared, the big header tank is then filled. While the big header tank is filling, the rest of the incubation system is set up. Next, the secondary holding tank is filled, getting rid of most of the air pockets that are built up.
You still have to have equal distribution of water pressure going into each jar. And this stabilizes the water pressure. As long as this water pressure is stable, this water pressure is stable, then you've got a constant down pressure on the eggs at all times. But you see, without the vents, that would just create a back pressure, until you opened up all the jars. And this way it's just more better. And you always get a little squirt coming out of there for no reason. And that lets all the air out of the line. Okay, so now that is full. But you see what I mean by little cavities of air once in a while? I don't know why that is.
From there, you start filling the jars. The excess water from the jars are drained into the back holding tank. The back holding tanks are then drained back into the lake, which completes the water circulation of the system. And finally, you have to hook up the alarm system.
The alarm system is on a mercury switch float system. And it's reversed to a sump pump mercury thing, because on a sump pump, as the float goes up, it activates the pump. But in this system here, it's just the opposite. As the water level goes down, and the black float that you see up there, it's immersed in the header tank, and then as it goes down, and then that activates a mechanism over here that's hooked to a siren to tell us that either one of two things. In fact, it does both. If the hydro goes off, it'll automatically put the siren on. And if the water level drops, it'll automatically put the siren on. So what we'll do is we'll just put the float in now. If indeed the water level drops to below this mercury switch, what happens is the mercury switch will automatically level off until and that tells us that the water level has dropped below the accepted level. So that's there. So we know that's working. If, for example, the hydro goes off, and I'm gonna shut the hydro off just by unplugging the hydro. So we know two things are happening. If the water level goes down, the hydro goes up. That's our siren system. It's all activated by your 12-volt battery. So you have to make sure for 21 days that we always have a well-charged battery on the alarm system.
Normally, spawning begins shortly after the ice breaks up in a lake, at temperatures of 7 degrees to 9 degrees Celsius, but has been known to occur over a range from 6 degrees to 11 degrees Celsius. The best place to catch pickerel for the spawn is on rock rubble shorelines and rock rubble riverbeds, as this is their normal spawning habitat.
And when do we go to catch fish? Everybody asks me when we go to catch fish. And jokingly but sincerely I say, well, whenever Judy tells me we go catch fish. Now, why does Judy have an ear or an eye on this here catch and fish system? It goes back to 1982 when we first started catching fish. I was told that, you know, like 1 or 2 days after the ice is out, you can go and get your pickerel. Well, you can go and look for pickerel 1 or 2 days after the ice is out, but it's really quite too soon because the water hasn't warmed up enough yet. And we used to spend 14 days out on the lake looking for fish, and it was only usually the last 3 or 4 days that you got your most fish. So anyways, over the period of time, and I have to rely on Judy's expertise and her experience to tell us, well, okay, tonight's the night. And of course I don't have any boats and motors ready, so I have to hurry around and get all my equipment ready and everything else. So
Many people are needed for the broodstock or the spawn collection process, and they're all volunteers. These people are split into basically 4 groups. 3 groups go out and collect the broodstock, while the 4th group stays at the hatchery. The hatchery group, or home base, is needed for preparations for the actual spawning process, coordination and communications between all parties out on the lake, documenting what fish are caught and seen at the various locations as reported back by the lake crews, as well as keeping the hatchery stove going for when everyone gets back from being out in the cold and the water. 2 boat crews go out onto the lake to collect pickerel, one on each side of the lake. These 2 groups are known as the North Side Lake Crew and the South Side Lake Crew. The 3rd group goes up the Rainy River to the rapids to collect their broodstock. This is the Rainy River Crew. Crew descriptions and equipment. People start arriving at the hatchery around 7:30 and start helping to get ready. All the boats are equipped with an FRS radio to keep in contact with the hatchery and assist in keeping track of the total amount of pickerel being caught, as well as how many of each sex. There are 1 to 2 boats that go to the Rainy River, depending on how many people go that night. One boat carries 2 people, along with the nets, low-powered flashlights, a thermometer, and 2 barrels. These 2 barrels are used to transport the pickerel back to the hatchery from the Rainy River, and to keep the males and females separated. The other boat that goes to the river usually carries the rest of the Rainy River crew, known as the netters or catchers. The river crew dresses extra warm and also wear hip waders, because they actually go in the water to collect the stock.
To go on the pickerel run, proper attire must be worn, preferably self-knitted socks. Well, not self-knitted. Aunt Carol Ann, thank you.
The Rainy River crew heads out around dusk. The Rainy River is the ideal place for netting pickerel. The water is shallow enough that you can wade into the water, which makes it easier for individuals to net the pickerel. This is where most of the broodstock is collected. When they get to the rapids, and before the collection of the stock begins, a thermometer is placed in the river to monitor the water temperature. Also before the collection of stock, 2 cages or holding tanks are put in the river. These 2 tanks are designated male and female to keep them separated so they do not prematurely spawn or release eggs. They are also kept in the river so they have enough oxygen to survive until it's time to go back to the hatchery. When it gets dark out and the pickerel start to spawn, the netters or catchers wade into the river with landing nets and low light flashlights. The river crew uses 6-volt handheld flashlights for the lower light factor in order not to spook the pickerel within the river system. The netters spot the pickerel by watching for the golden brass eyes that seem to glow in the dark, and are gently caught in nets. These eyes are like cat's eyes at night. They seem to reflect any light that is shone in their direction. Spotting these eyes is a lot harder than it seems. This takes a lot of practice, but once learned, becomes second nature. Nets are used as this is the least harmful way of catching the pickerel. Once they're caught, the sex is determined. This is done by gently pushing on the belly of the pickerel to see if eggs come out or sperm. After the sex is determined, they are put into their corresponding cages until transport back to the hatchery. When the crew thinks they have enough, or if the pickerel stop running or spawning, the pickerel are loaded into the holding tanks in the boat. Again, keeping the males and females separated. Pickerel generally stop spawning if the water temperature goes below 5 degrees Celsius. The lake crew boats each hold 3 to 4 people, as well as one container filled with lake water to keep the fish until returning to the hatchery. Because they generally only get males on the lake, only one container is needed for the lake crews. Nets are also used to catch the stock, with minimal harm to the fish. There are other ways to catch the fish, but this is the least harmful way. The lake crews use high-powered 1 million candle power 12-volt lights to locate the pickerel and for seeing on the lake at night. Low-level flashlights, like the ones the Rainy River crew uses, are not adequate enough to see on the lake. Each lake crew consists of one person driving the boat, one person with the light, and 1 to 2 people with the nets. Netting the pickerel on the lake is a little more difficult than netting them at the Rainy River. The lake crews are in deeper water, harder to get places, and are limited by having to stay in the boat. Because of this limitation, the lake crews have to work more as a team to catch each individual pickerel, where the Rainy River crew catches them individually. This can prove to be a difficult task, especially in rough weather. This is one of the reasons why most of the broodstock comes from the Rainy River. Both the lake crews stay out on the lake long after the Rainy crew gets back to the hatchery. Hatchery documentation. While the crews are up the Rainy and out on the lake, they are constantly reporting back to the hatchery different information. Each side of the lake has its own chart that documents how many pickerel are caught, how many pickerel are sighted, and at which location. This information provides a good idea of how effective the program has been from year to year. By all the lake crews reporting back on a regular basis, they can also determine if they have enough stock for everyone to come back to the hatchery and start the spawning process. When the crews get back to the hatchery, the fish are separated into 2 holding tanks that are placed in the lake just outside of the hatchery. Again, the males and females are kept separate. There are also 2 tubs in the hatchery to hold the pickerel for the spawning or milting process. Extra barrels are brought in to hold the extra males, as it takes more than twice the amount of males for the spawning process. The average amount of pickerel needed for the spawn is approximately 8 females and 32 to 40 males, depending on the size. The best size of male for spawning is from 3 to 10 pounds, and the average size of female for spawning are 5 to 12 pounds. Most years now, the hatchery personnel are lucky enough to acquire enough broodstock to fill their license for 1 million eggs in one night. The Saug Lake program also captures the ripe stock and spawns them in the same night they are caught. This can vary with other programs and from lake to lake, where they have to collect broodstock over several days or even weeks and wait for the fish to ripen. It all depends on how plentiful the pickerel population is.
The years that it took earlier versus the time it takes now, it's due to 2 things. First of all, experience, because we don't have to go out there the day the ice is out, and it's also due to the broodstock that's there now. Whenever we went out in 1982, they'd sit there from 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock and maybe not see any fish. the next night, 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. We've been up there right till morning broke, eh? And the fact is, going back in time, even after we built the hatchery, we thought that bringing the fish back to the hatchery was a bad thing for the fish. So this is often a tangent, but it's important. It's important because Judy is always thinking about the stress of the fish and how important it is not to put fish under stress. Lots of times we would catch fish up the river and we would bring them home in the tubs that we bring them home in. But by the time we got home, and this would be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we would try to process the fish. And all of a sudden, like, even though they were given eggs at the river, by the time we got home, they wouldn't give up eggs, and they tensed up. So this 2 years in a row, actually, or maybe even 3 years, we moved all our equipment over to the river. We built a platform right at the edge of the river, and Ron built a tent over top of the platform to keep the snow off us. And we processed all the fish right at the river, and we brought the eggs back to the hatchery. Now this was not fun. Even though we had a tent, a propane heater, it was not fun. So finally, I guess Judy had enough fun having no fun, and she said, let's go back to the old way, but let's bring the fish home and let's do them as quick as we used to bring them home and maybe sit around and talk about stuff for a while. But as soon as we get home now, we start processing fish, and with our techniques now, we apparently the fish don't stress out like they used to. So that's a good thing. But I just want you to know that, boy, in time past, trying to get to where we are now, we've gone through a lot of different programs, a lot of different trials and errors, ups and downs, lots and lots of mistakes. And we've lost a lot of eggs through errors, but it was a learning. Every time you do something wrong, if you don't learn from that one, then you're a complete idiot. So we've learned a lot, and we're not the smartest people in the world, but we've sure come a long ways in our percentage of survival, both on the incubation part of it and whatever.
Once the females and males are brought into the hatchery, the spawning or milting process can begin. The spawning table is set up in front of the tubs and the rolling machine. The lights are dimmed during the actual spawning procedure, as this will affect the fish's demeanor. Because the pickerel's eyes are sensitive to light, the pickerel remain calmer with dim lighting while in or out of water. It's easier to milt the female when they are ripe, calm, and as stress-free as possible.
And we bring all the fish home, and we put them in the holding cages, and then that's where Judy kicks in. Like before, back in the 80s, whenever I was doing it, I would strip the female, and then I would strip the male, and I wasn't paying too much time to time sequence, because over the years, and I said, when my first jar of eggs that I took out to Hartley's, there was half white and half dead, half alive type of thing. But over the years, Judy has taken over the manipulation of the eggs, and they have come up with a fantastic formula, which means a time element. And Judy does a lot of reading, and did a lot of reading to get to where she is now.
First, a small amount of water is put into the 16-inch diameter mixing bowl. A small amount of male sperm is then added. A feather can be used, as it's supposed to be delicate enough not to damage the eggs. The female eggs are milted and added to the sperm. The female is milted between 10 to 15 seconds, or 1/3 of a cup. The fish is held with one hand on the tail and the other on the tummy. The tail is gently lifted upwards, while applying pressure along the abdomen towards the genital opening. Then, the male's sperm is added. At least 2 different males are used with each batch to ensure fertilization and avoid bad genetics. the eggs and sperm are carefully mixed together. The mixing procedure is done by moving the bowl around gently in a circular motion. Sometimes a feather can be used as it's supposed to be delicate enough not to damage the eggs. This mixing or swirling process is done for 2 minutes. This is the time it takes for the eye of the egg to close. After the eye of the egg is closed, the sperm cannot penetrate and fertilize the egg. This process is repeated until all the females have been milted or until the group has harvested enough eggs to fill their license. Mudding. Immediately after the mixing procedure has been completed, a process called mudding must be performed. When expelled from the pickerel female, the eggs are surrounded by a sticky mucoid layer. In a hatchery, this mucoid layer must be removed, so the eggs do not clump together in the bell jars. Clumping in the jars can actually be harmful because of the constant turning of the eggs due to the water flow and circulation. Also, if the eggs were to clump together, and one of those eggs was to become infested with fungus, this one egg could contaminate the entire clump, and potentially the entire jar. Presently in Ontario, there are 2 commonly used methods to mud the eggs: Fuller's earth and tannic acid. Fuller's earth acts as an abrasive manner to remove the adhesiveness, and tannic acid dissolves the gelatinous layer on the eggs. Both methods are equally effective in removing the mucoid layer, obtaining very successful hatches. There has been some discussion that tannic acid may harden the egg shells, and leads to further speculation that this causes the sac fry to expend more energy in hatching out of these hardened shells. This in return leads to a higher mortality rate. The Saug Lake program uses the Grey Fuller's Earth method of mudding. As mentioned before, the Grey Fuller's Earth is mixed with water prior to the actual spawn. Each batch of eggs are poured into 1-gallon jugs and topped up with the Grey Fuller's Earth mixture. The lid is then put on the jug and placed on the rollers for 20 minutes. This removes the stickiness from the eggs so they don't clump together during hardening. The jars are numbered and all times are recorded on a chart. This ensures all jugs are done the same. The charts record the jar number, start time, and end time. Prior to having the rolling machine, volunteers were needed to roll the jugs on their laps for 20 minutes apiece.
We used to sit 10 people around the room. Telling stories for 20 minutes per jar. The jars would be, your knees would be soaking wet come morning, eh? Like we're here at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning doing, doing all these jars. Quite a while. Yeah, I'll show you some documents there. But anyways, Ron Toms come up with the idea, Marlene's husband, that we should get a conveyor belt. So my friend Steve Hall, who works for the beer company, he says, we have electric conveyors all over the place. So he come up with this little conveyor.
From there, the eggs are gently put into floating mesh baskets, known as the egg baskets. These baskets are in the tubs, which are filled and maintained by circulating water from the lake. This process is done to harden the eggs. The eggs are left in there for 4 to 6 hours to harden. The eggs naturally harden, so they do not get damaged from other elements. Both time and exposure hardens the eggs. They also harden faster in higher water temperatures. After 4 to 6 hours, the eggs are tested for proper hardness. This is determined by gently squeezing between the thumb and finger. When the eggs are determined to be hard enough, they are carefully transferred into the incubation system, more specifically, the bell jars.
Okay, I'm going to group them again. Again.
So now we got all the jars full. Now getting back to the mechanics of how these jars work. We have a source of water. You have to have a source of water to give you a source of oxygen. So we have two sump pumps, one on the north side, one on the south side, depending which way the wind blows. They keep this header box full at all times. We got water coming in and water going out. So that there is a consistent head pressure. PSI being it doesn't fluctuate. That water has to stay the same height all the time. The water comes in from the bottom of the container here, and it goes into what we call the header pipe. The header pipe is supplied with 6 spouts. The 6 spouts going down the center of the jar and stopping 3/8 of an inch from the bottom. These jars are concave so that when the water hits the bottom of the jar, it flares. The current of the water flares and goes up equally all around the jar. As the eggs travel, the eggs go up the outside perimeter and they go back down the inside perimeter. And that keeps the rotation of the water and the oxygen supply to all the jars. It's a continual motion of the eggs. The eggs don't look like they're moving on top very much, but they have to move at the bottom. And that's why it's important for the egg to be hard. Like if the egg was just going to stay on top there, you wouldn't have to harden as much. But they hit the bottom of the jar, so they have to be able to bounce. And that's how Judy tests them. She picks out an egg out of the basket, and if it bounces on the table, it's okay. If it breaks,
poor little egg.
if it breaks, it ain't no good.
The jars overflow by a spout facing the back. These spouts drain into the back holding tanks, which have screens to stop any eggs or hatched fry from draining into the lake. These back holding tanks are also used later when the eggs start hatching. The back holding tanks are then drained back into the lake, which completes the water circulation of the system. This system allows constant lake temperature and freshness of the water throughout the process, as the water being pumped is right from the lake itself. Water circulation is 1 gallon per minute. Proper water circulation is crucial in the incubation process. Too fast, and the egg sac will rupture or damage the egg and lead to a high mortality rate. Too slow, and the oxygen level will be too low for the eggs.
During the incubation period, if an egg, on the top of an egg is an air sac, like all eggs, a chicken egg, everything has an air sac, and that air sac is designed so that the egg stays right side up. If an egg tumbles for a period of time, like oscillating, it will rupture within itself, and your rate of mortality at the end of the 21-day incubation period mortality is higher than survival. So, over the years, they recommend 1 gallon per minute of a water flow is about the right speed for an egg to rotate. You need a fresh water supply for the oxygen content to be supplied. So what we do here is we just so the egg is moving without turning somersaults. Period of time. It doesn't hurt to roll for a minute or two, but a lot of the hatcheries, they've got them boiling too hard to drop. When we started, we did too.
Monitoring incubation period. Well before the eggs hatch, monitoring is needed to watch temperature fluctuations and to remove dead eggs from the jars. With temperature fluctuations, it's important to make sure the temperature does not get too high. This will cause the eggs to hatch too early. When young walleye hatch too early, it can cause high mortality. This is due to the lower jaw not being fully developed and making it impossible for the larval fish to begin exogenous feeding. Exogenous is referring to the fish eating food from outside of the body, whereas endogenous feeding would refer to the fish feeding from the yolk sac. With a bell jar system, the constant turning of the eggs by the water divides the good live eggs from the dead ones. The dead eggs become lighter and turn a white color. Being lighter, they end up on top of the eggs. In this position, they can be siphoned carefully from the top and discarded. Incandescent lighting is utilized within the hatchery, as fluorescent lighting can damage the eggs. The hatching. It takes approximately 21 days for the eggs to hatch into fry. The eggs can be induced to hatch early by gradually increasing the water temperature of their environment within the hatchery. This can be done by simply adding warm water to the jars. When the eggs start hatching, the fry overflow into the back holding tank. They are confined to the back overflow tank by a fine microscreen. When the fry are ready for release, the flow of the water jar is turned off. The bottom drainage valve is then opened, and the back holding tank is drained 2/3 out to the lake. The microscreen keeps the fry from draining out into the lake while draining the tank. The valve leading out to the lake is then closed, and the microscreen is then removed. The inside drainage valve is then opened, and the fry are drained into 5-gallon pails to be released.
So we shut the lake valve off, and we have our 5-gallon pail ready here.
Oh, I see.
So we open up the bottom valve there, which holds the fry. Now,
Release of eggs and fry to the lake. Prior to 1992, all the eggs were hatched and released into the lake and the pond.
see, I put the fry, not necessarily I put the fry on the spawning beds. I just off to the side of the spawning beds, if you can find a shallow, preferably weedy bay. That's where the zooplankton is more prolific than out on the barren rock. So I take most of my fry to areas where I think the zooplankton is flourishing.
In 1992, the decision was made to not only release the fry into the lake, but eggs at the eyed up stage as well. There is some speculation that fish have a homing sense. The fish use this homing sense when finding their location to spawn. Some believe that if the eggs are hatched in jars, they do not acquire this homing sense, and therefore find it hard to find an appropriate place to spawn. This is just speculation, however, as there is no scientific proof to verify this theory. There was, however, a noticeable rise in the population in the years following the release of unhatched eggs into the lake. It has also been documented on several occasions that transplanted fish have found their way back to the place of origin.
We are at Pickerel Island, and some of our larger females from the lake side come from this area here. There's a rock bed runs off the point here, real nice rock rubble, and I'm going to put the rest of this pail of fry here. Now this year we're putting all the fry, the whole million fry that were hatched in the hatchery, putting them all on the north side this year, because last year we put all the fry and the fingerlings out of the pond on the south side. And being that this is almost two separate lakes with the channel connecting it, it's better to stock one side one year and one side the other year, and let nature stock the sides that we're not helping. Now, this was recommended by the ministry, and we're just following their orders. Here I'm putting some more eyed out eggs on the rock bed here. They'll be hatched in a couple of hours. The water's still pretty warm next to shore here, and they'll be hatched before the sun goes down. The reason for doing this is probably genetically, the eyed up eggs hatching on the rock rubble have a higher drawing attraction whenever they grow up to be big ones. This is only a theory. Nobody really knows for sure. I'm going to save the rest of those eyed-up eggs and the rest of the fry for Anderson's Point, which is just across the way there.
Release of eggs to the Rainy. Eggs at the eyed-up stage are also distributed to the Rainy River spawning beds. This is done with a little more care than when released into the lake. A funnel is used to carefully place the eggs down between the rock rubble on the river's bottom, so that the eggs are protected from the elements and possible predators, which leads to a better survival rate. There is also speculation that by placing the eggs there prior to hatching, a homing sense can be developed.
You see, underneath that limestone there's at least 16 inches of stone, and the egg has to have at least 8 inches away from the sunshine. So all the eggs that are laid by the fish have to percolate down through the first 8 inches of stone. The first 8 inches of stone, if the egg sticks to the first 8 inches and the sunshine hits it, it won't incubate. So that's why it's important to have the depth of stone even on the shoreline. You've got to have a certain given depth of stone in order for the egg to incubate. So that's why the depth of stone is important. People think just because you take a few stones off the top, they're not hurting anything. But that decreases the depth, the overall depth. And you have to have that depth in order to have a successful hatch in nature.
Survival rate. There are 3 ways the pickerel is distributed within this program. A percentage of the eyed-up eggs are transported by boat and deposited into the rock rubble of spawning beds around the lake. This is about 50%, or 500,000. Another percentage of the fry are delegated to being raised in the pickerel pond for later release. This would be about 10%, or 100,000 fry. And the remaining fry, from the 1 million eggs, are released on top of the spawning beds. So even if something happens to the pond and there is a total loss, the program is not being a waste, as the release of eggs at the eyed-up stage and hatched fry straight into the lake still guarantees a success rate. An approximate average of 3% of 500,000 is still 15,000. The next essential part of the program is the pond. The pond is needed to raise the hatched fry to fingerling size to be released into the lake. By raising the pickerel to this stage, it gives them a better chance of survival when released into the lake. Site selection. The pond was developed in 1982. Several locations were considered for potential pond sites before being dismissed for various reasons. The current location was finally picked after the Schwartz family agreed to donate the use of the land for the purpose of the lake's program. The land was then eventually purchased by Johnny and Judy Matthews.
So anyway, then I come in this road, and at that time none of these buildings were built there. There was nothing here. It was just all bush right through to where Gail and John are now. Ben Schwartz had built the little yellow cabin and the new cabin where Gail is. So I come up to this swale here, and this was just a bush, and it was all ash, mostly ash and maple with a hydro line going through it. Then I got looking at that, so I went and asked Carol and Jimmy. I don't know whether they were both there at the time or not, but I asked them what are the chances of borrowing one of your lots to put a pond in, and they said, and I remember their comment, they said, well, you know, things aren't selling very fast around here, so I don't suppose it's going to take any hurt. So they give me permission to develop it, and so we did.
Construction of the pond. A grant from the Ministry of Natural Resources and donation money assisted in the construction of the pond. The land was cleared by volunteers, all in one weekend. The pond was designed to allow drainage right into the lake with a long standpipe. This is so fry that slip by while draining the pond go straight into the lake.
After I finally got permission got permission to build a pond on Sog, close to Sog, I found this ash swale. I looked at it and I thought, well, looking from the road down through the tree, and all you need for a pickerel pond is about 6 to 8 feet of water. And I thought, well, that looks like a 6-foot dam will do just fine here. So we started cutting, and I had a crew started, and I think we did it on a weekend. I don't know for sure, but a couple of days. So they started from the lake up, and we started from the road down. So anyways, as time went by, we got it all cleared off. We had Doc come in, and he stumped it, and we got rid of all the stumps, and we bulldozed it flat. We used rakes and shovels, bonfires. Yeah, the very first tree I cut, and I guess that's a favorite story. The very first tree I cut, I told you that the hydro cut we actually didn't start it, we started the hydro cut, and we were trying to fall away from the hydro cut. The first tree I fell, of course, right across the line, and shorted out the switch, and knocked the hydro out for the entire lake. But anyways, getting back to my story. Once the stumps were out, then we had to start building the dam. And the dam had to have a pipe going through the bottom of it for drainage. Then I got these diagrams out of the manual on how to build dams. So I followed the instructions. We had to pour cement baffles around every pipe. So we made an 8 feet by 4 feet high baffle into the T part. Now that T part now has since been suspended because after 24 years the galvanized pipe has rusted out. And this spring we had to shove that insert through the middle of it, the plastic insert, which is another story. But 60 feet of pipe going to the outside here. So that was fine. That was our first step. We had to put that first stand-up pipe, and then we had to start trucking in dirt. The first load of dirt to come in, we had to drive up and we had to back down the driveway, and we had to start filling right at the umbrella. See, this was all just a big hill right down to the lake. So we had to start leveling that off right at the picnic tables and by the corner there. Billy Anderson lost the truck the very first trip, and he backed right in. The trees that are there then are gone now, or else he ended right in the creek. But he got off the road, he backed in there. Okay, that was one story. Here he is here all stuck. And then Foster Boyce was in charge of leveling it off, as Billy and 2 or 3 trucks all in. So anyways, it got real soft, right down where the standpipe is there now. And he got stuck in there. And he really got stuck in there, and they had to get the truck. He couldn't get out with the winch because the winch was buried, so we had to get the truck to pull him out. Remember that? And here we are finally making the dam. Okay, what I wanted to get to is I thought all we needed was a 6-foot rise to bring up the water. It ended up being a 16-foot rise. Instead of to cut the shortage story, instead of a $4,000 pickerel pond, it ended up being a $16,000 pickerel pond. I ran out of money. For $4,000, I ran out of money just before I come to the standpipe. And I says to Doc, I said, Doc, I got no more money. And what do you mean you got no more money? I says, well, I've only got $4,000. Shit, that was gone the first day, just stumping. Jokingly, he said that. So anyways, he says, don't worry about it. Let's finish the pond, and you can pay me whenever you get the money. So we did. We finished the pond. We did everything that had to get done. We did the rest of the culvert. And that's where that black standpipe has to go up now. So we put the black standpipe up and got it all painted, and there it is there, painted there, and everything's working. And then, but $16,000 was starting to bother me, and I want to finish that story before I start this story, because $16,000 had to get paid somehow. And at that point in time, we weren't doing any fundraising. We didn't do any advertising as far as, you know, help me, because I was depending on the CFIP grant to cover everything. So when I realized that the government wasn't going to cover any more of my expenses, I sent out a newsletter to all the people on SOG. And this is probably one of the most important and exciting parts of anything that should be told. because the people I sent the letters to responded positively to coming to the call, and donations started to come in. And by the end of, and I forget, was it 1 year or 2 years, donations were sufficient enough to cover the rest of the expense for that whole pickerel pond. And since then, donations have never stopped. We keep the ongoing newsletter going out and keep people informed on our expenses and our incomes, and that's a good thing.
Pond preparation. The pond is generally filled as soon as the ice goes out. Oxygen is needed in the pond for the ecosystem to exist. Therefore, an aeration system is needed to supply the oxygen to the pond. Many different ways were tried for aeration of the pond. These ways included a boat motor tilted so that the water would spray up in the air. This was tried in hopes that the oxygen would be mixed in with the spray as it came back to the water. Fire hoses were also tried in the same way, shooting water up in a spraying motion, hoping to oxygenize the water. The current system consists of a compressor pumping air into smaller branched off lines. These lines have small blocks or stones on the end to weigh them down. This system seems to oxygenize the pond very well.
These were the original ones. They were getting wore out and plugged up. We have to clean them every year, but every 36 inches, I think it is, you put a drop line every 36 inches. That's what you see, the bubbles out there. So that drops down 36 inches all the way across to 275 times. And the air is introduced to the main pipes there, and it comes from down in the building there. We have an air pump that runs 24 hours a day and is steadily pumping air into the pond. And this here maintains our oxygen level. Now the reason that the oxygen level drops from 12 parts per million to 7 parts per million is as I feed the soybean, that enhances the zooplankton population. The soybean, in order to deteriorate and do what soybean does when it rots or ferments, it needs oxygen. So therefore, you're robbing the water of its oxygen in order to produce zooplankton.
The system is set up with the help of volunteers. These long lines are strung along the side of the pond, and all those stone lines have to be attached one by one.
This is years of doing this. When we first done it, they were so hard. By the time everybody got done, their fingers wouldn't work.
The lines are then gently put into the water. And are attached to the pump. There are other more modern methods of aeration being considered for future use.
Now, as I said earlier, I started feeding the pond approximately 23 days ago, the same day, May the 29th. In order to get the pond ready, it takes about 2 weeks for this here special home brew. It's just soybean meal mixed with water and a little bit of yeast in it to start the fermentation. It creates the food habitat for the phytoplankton, Too bad that camera didn't have a smell detector. Usually I just go 2 scoops and then that's a done deal. And we go back and wash the wheelbarrow out. We do this once a week. We usually do it on a Thursday or a Friday.
Microscopic plants, called phytoplankton, use light from the sun to convert the soy into food. Zooplankton then eat the phytoplankton. Lastly, the pickerel fry then eat the zooplankton. This, in a very general sense, is the pond's ecosystem and how the pickerel are fed.
And in the meantime, I'll tell you what I've done. Starting the day that we caught the fish to get ready for the spawn, I come out here and I started feeding the pond. The pond had already been filled. I hooked up the air system to give it lots of oxygen, and I fed it. It took about 14 days. It took about 2 weeks to first start to notice the water fleas developing. So once it's happened now is the original water fleas have had little baby water fleas, and the fry are so small that you can have all the water fleas or food in the pond, but if it isn't small enough for the little fry to get a hold of, it'll still starve. So it's important to get a good start on the water fleas so that the little babies are born again, and that the babies are small enough for the small fry to eat. Once the fry get large enough, well then of course it doesn't matter how big they are. They can attack the big ones. So the pond has been ready for about 7 days, and everything is just 100%. The oxygen level is up to about 6.5, and I just shut the air off now this morning until we get the fry in, and we'll start the air up again. The air will run steady all summer long for 52 days until we take the fry out. The grass needs cutting, but everything else is great.
Acclimatizing the fry to the pond. Acclimatizing the fry into the pond is done by mixing the transport water with the pond water to bring the transport water to the same temperature as the pond water. Once the water in the pails has been gradually brought to the appropriate temperatures, the fry are released into the pond.
So here we are at the fish pond. I took the temperature of the water at the hatchery, and it was 15 degrees Celsius. And I just took the temperature here at the pond, and it was 21 degrees. So that means that we have to bring these pail of fry up to a temperature of approximately 18 or 19. 2 or 3 degrees doesn't make that much difference, but 7 degrees does. So what I'll do is I'll pour in some pond water into the 5-gallon pails here. And gradually acclimatize them to about 19 degrees. Make a 2 degrees difference.
Predators. During the pond process, there are many predators that can devastate a pickerel stock. Turtles, bacteria, and insects like backswimmers and water tigers.
During the migration, we have turtle migration. We have sometimes as high as 3 turtles want to set up shop in our pond, and they eat the pickerel. But I like to catch and release even turtles. Some people say I'm crazy, we should kill all the turtles, but they have a place in the ecosystem. So what I've done now is I've used this for beaver in the spring to catch and relocate beaver, that nuisance beaver that are plugging culverts on the road. So I'm going to try it for turtles this year. And what I'm going to do is I'll put it in the pond. Probably within the next couple of weeks I'll put it in. I'll tie a fish to the trigger here. Instead of poplar, I'll put fish there. The turtle will come up and he will grab the fish, and he will be contained within the cage. Then I'll take him down the lake, and I usually put them in a little lake called Young's Lake, over down around the corner there. So it's an easy relocation, and you're not hurting anything. So anyways, that's one of the predators. The other predator, of course, is the heron. Carol Ann looks after that. And then there's the bugs, which we can live with. They're not that bad. Do it. And that's one of the ones that will eat. I don't know how many they eat today, but this is my 3rd turtle. This is my 3rd turtle.
Wow.
And the little pickerel were swimming all around. So he's probably eating as he's caught. Yeah.
come up over top of the hill there, and they come in here to have a snack.
Oh, and then the bird, the herring, or the crane, or the mud hen, or call it what you will. It's a big predator. So I tried different methods of deterring that. Prior to Carol Ann building her house over there, I would string. They told me if you put a rope around the pond, that the crane would not. First of all, they're not supposed to be land in the water. Well, that's a fallacy. They will land in the water. But if you put a string around the pond, they won't step over the string. So if the water's there and the bird lies there or lands there, he's not supposed to step over the string. But he either went over it or under it or something, or landed in the water, but he'd still come. And then once Carol Ann moved in, of course, she took the broom to him every morning and night. So Carol Ann was our bird deterrer.
Oh, see, what did he do? Get out of here! Move! Move! See, he either just goes around the thing and lands there, or that's his favorite tree up there, that dead tree there. He'll perch on that. But you have to walk right towards him and keep baiting. Because screaming now doesn't work. He's used to my voice.
Draining the pond. With the old original standpipe, they would start to drain the pond 2 or 3 feet the night before the release. Volunteers start showing up around 9 or 10 in the morning and start preparing for the day's events. The pond is drained by removing one board at a time, about every 15 minutes. Only one is done because that's all that can be reached at any one time because of the water levels. The fingerlings stay in deeper water and usually swim away from the current, so there is no need to worry about losing the fingerlings down the chute. The fingerlings are collected by drag nets. While the water level is still high, the nets are dragged by canoe. When the water level gets lower, they can wade into the water and drag the nets that way. The collected fingerlings are put into a tub, where they can be distributed to the lake in pails. The fingerlings are distributed by boat to various locations on the lake. Release Day Fundraiser. While the release crew works on draining the pond, lots of events take place throughout the day. Airplane rides, kids games and lots of prizes, a horseshoe tournament, minnow races, the ever-fun blind canoe race, draws, lots of draws. Some people seem to win more often than others. but everyone has the same chance of winning. And lots of great food.
Is that what you want?
None of this would be possible without all the volunteers that donate their precious time. The last of the essentials to the program is the spawning beds. Enhancement of the spawning beds is a big part of the program's success. These spawning beds ensure a self-sustaining population.
This is one phase of the pickerel spawning reclamation project at the Rainy River. It involves putting 150 ton of limestone in the river to reestablish the spawning bed with a grant from the Department of Natural Resources or the Ministry of Natural Resources, plus $3,000 from the Sagamesing Pickerel Group. All the work is being done. The people you see out here are working voluntarily. And the stone is being trucked in on a lumber road, left up on the hill and being hauled down here with a rather large loader.
Starting with the pickerel pond rehabilitation program, as far as introducing new rock on the shorelines of Saug, where traditionally the pickerel have always spawned, but over the many years of men coming here, we have disrupted that particular spawning bed by, first of all, removing some of the rock rubble to build cribs and retaining walls and what have you, without realizing we were doing damage. So over the years, in the million years, lots of things have happened, like sediment, silt, and algae grow and everything else. So in order to reestablish a better atmosphere for the fish to spawn in, you have to have at least 16 inches of rock rubble, because the eggs, as they're being spawned, have to, first of all, they got to get out of the sunlight. So as the egg is being spawned or laid, the eggs filter down, and you got these 4 to 5 inch rock rubble, and they have to get, first of all, out of the sunlight and away from rock bass and sunfish and minnows, because they'll eat the little eggs. So it's important to have a good overburden of rock rubble. And this is why in the wintertime it really does a good job, because we dump the rock in piles on top of the ice, then we get a backhoe and we level it all off on top of the ice, and in that way we know we got 16 to 20 inches of a depth. And of course when the spring comes, the ice melts and all this rock goes down nice and even. It's amazing. That's the theory. In the wintertime, it's always the best time. Now, we've tried summertime distribution of rock. We've taken rocks over by boat and just throwed them out. A whole bunch of people in boats throwed them off. But you have no way of knowing how deep you are or how shallow of an overburden. So anyway, but it's better than nothing. So anyway, the wintertime distribution is the best. Our first project, I don't necessarily know if it's the first or not, but the first major project by ice in the wintertime was in front of the camp, in front of our camp here on the north side of the camp. It took 3 years to do it. I made a winter road on top of the ice, and it took many hours, because you got to have at least 2-3 feet of ice for a truck to haul maybe 3 cubic yards to a load. It's a small road, but it still weighs 3 tons. It's about a ton for every cubic yard. And I hired Doc Brooks with an old Dodge, a yellow Dodge, single axle dump truck, and his backhoe, and we had all the, I forget where I had the rock dumped. I had it dumped at Kennedy Bay, because we had to haul all the way from Kennedy Bay, because he brought it in from Pendleton Falls, and that day it was 40 below when he brought it in, and all the rock stuck to the back of his dump truck. It was a big tandem dump truck, and we had to get alligator burners and propane torches to heat up the boxes. It wasn't a heated box. But anyways, we got the rock unloaded, And then Doc come in with his single axle dump truck the first year, and we did a good job. And we had the first part of approximately 600 feet altogether, or 800 feet across the north side of the camp. So that was a good start. And then 2 years went by, and then 3 years. 3 years later, we got right over to almost to my boathouse. So, and already the fish were using that rock, which was a real inspiration. And after we did that shoal, we made up our minds that we would never harvest any fish off that shoal. That would be au naturel spawning beds for the fish that started to use it. And as we speak to this day, we still do not take any fish off that shoal. And that is probably the best spawning bed on the whole lake, probably for more reasons than just us not taking any or disturbing it. Now we go by there every night when we're looking, and we count our fish, and there's always more fish on that shoal than any other shoal. So either during or between that time, we had summer projects. I would always keep people busy, and I had rock brought in, dumped at the Northside parking lot, and we did what we call Sinisac Shoal. That's between Frank Purvis and Don Sinisac's. Jim Robb was there. There's a real good shoreline that the pickerel have always used traditionally, and we just enhanced it. And enhancement meaning putting more rock on top of the rock that's already there. Now this was local rock that I had brought in from the local quarry, either Doc Brooks or Dale Brooks brought that in. And then one summer we were doing road work on the North Road, and they were doing a lot of blasting. So I had Russell Forsey was the foreman then. I had Russell bring all the small blasted rock, dumped at Northside parking lot, and we had that dumped there. And then I thought, well, you know, doing it by boat didn't really tell us how deep we were putting the rock on the bottom of it, so I said, let's try it by skidoo. So I waited till January, when the lake was frozen, and we had this here 12-ton of rock piled at the Northside parking lot, and I didn't think to cover it. And when it come time to chip it out, it was all frozen. What a nightmare that was. The guys didn't like me very much, but we chipped away and we chipped away, and we finally did get it all gone, and we took that out to One Tree Island. And we dumped that on top of the ice, and we hand maneuvered all that. This was all by hand, by pick and shovel, and by hand, and by skidoo, and by slate. So it was pretty obvious that that was not a good way to do it, not by skidoo. It was just too labor intensive. The winter time is a good idea, but not by skidoo, pick and shovel. So then the Indian Shoal come next on my priority list. The north side of the Indian Shoal has always been a really good spawning area. We had that dumped at the north side, and we physically motorboated, and I'm thinking it was 2 12-yard truckloads, all by boats, to the first part of the Indian Shoal. Then the next winter, I made a winter road right from the camp, right down past Blueberry, right over to the Indian Shoal. And then that's when I really did a good job. And I trucked all that rock myself with the Army truck. I didn't hire anybody. I hired Doc Brooks' backhoe to load it because I had it dumped right at camp. And I physically took it over myself. It took me quite a while. And Lawson had his fish shacks. Of course, Lawson always fishes right in the middle of the bay there. And every time I went between his shack and Dorothy's shack, his feet would get wet because the weight of the truck would push the water right up through the holes. And he warned me, don't go too fast, Johnny, because the ice will rupture. I got it done, and that was a good thing. Then, after the Indian Shoal, I still wanted to do Blueberry Island and Pickerel Island. So I went to the ministry and I asked if they could assist me financially to buy some more rock rubble to make more spawning beds. And at that point in time, they'd already been up to speed because you got to make a permit. You have to have permission to do all this work. You got to do a lot of paperwork. So they said, well, don't you think you have enough spawning beds yet? And I said, no, I don't think I do. Well, they said, if you
amalgamate, because this here, Steve Belfry, he's pretty heavy for trout, and he wanted us to get involved in trout spawning. So I said, and he asked me, like, where do the trout spawn? I said, well, they spawn off the end of Blueberry Island, the same place as pickerel do, except they spawn in deeper water. And I said, they spawn off the end of Pickerel Island, but they spawn in deeper water. He said, okay, I'll give you a whole bunch of money if you go from 0 to 10 feet instead of 0 to 4 feet, but it takes twice as much rock. So that was fine. I said, I can do that. So he gave us the money, and I forget the figures. I don't know how much money he gave us, a whole bunch of money. And then we put some money in too, other than local hatchery, bought a whole bunch of rock. And I'm saying a whole bunch of rock. If we flip the page over and we go over to the south side, I remember the Bakula boys and all of us working together. I had a bunch of rock dumped at Kennedy Bay, a whole bunch of rock. And we had, at that time, the Bakula had a barge, and we had boats, barges, I don't remember what kind of boats we had. But we started doing Nellie's Island. That was the first major spawning bed on the south side. We did Nellie's Island, and I'm pretty sure it was the same summer that we went across to the point of Bakula Island. And right out in front of their flagpole there, it's a terrific spawning area there between Nellie's and Bakula. We did that all by boat, and that was with local rock. And then it was a couple years later, or a year or two later, that we had another big push to do what we call the Imeson shoreline and Kelsey shoreline over to the sand beach. We hired a man that had a real big barge with a bobcat, and he would load, we went to Kennedy Bay, and we loaded the big barge with the bobcat, and he left enough room on the barge so that the bobcat traveled with the barge from Kennedy Bay to Imeson's and to Kelsey's. And when we arrived on shore, I had a crew of people for 5 days. We had over 30 people every day, because the barge had to be parked parallel with the shore, and there were big throw-out ropes. First of all, he'd put the bobcat on the lake side of the barge, and that would bring the pontoon boats as close to shore as he could get. He could get within about 8 feet, 7 feet, and then as he started to unload, the people on shore would pull the barge in closer. That was a good thing. And so we did Imeson Shoal and the Kelsey Shoal now are our best shoals on the south side. I don't think we still don't see as many fish on those two shoals as we see on the north side of the camp, but there was always more fish on the north side of the camp than there ever was there. Then, and I don't remember the years, but it was either in between the big barge in Kelsey's and Imeson's that we spent a lot of money and time in the middle of the winter rehabilitating the Rainy River spawning bed, which is our standby spawning bed. As we all know, without the Rainy River spawning crew and fish, our million eggs would take a lot longer than 1 day to harvest. So anyway, over a period of time, we call it prime spawning habitat, had been diminished to a minimum. There were still fish going up there, but we took pictures of the rapids. You can take your boat right up to the bottom of the rapids. And years gone by, I've watched the fish go up. There was 3 main channels. Within the channel system, there was rocks and boulders, and there was a kind of little island in the middle. And the fish would go up one side, up the middle, and up close to where we walked. So what I had Tony Brooks do is he brought down his backhoe. Don Sinisek took some pictures of it. But we excavated, and we virtually cleaned, it would be 150 feet of riverbed out. I don't think the Ministry of Environment will allow us to do that now, but back in those days it was okay. We took all the rocks out, we cleaned out the bottom, then we put all the rocks back in again. We were still on this limestone kick, because it was recommended that our pH level was not correct, and that limestone would help correct the pH level. A girl named Marilyn did a study over there. She worked for the ministry. So anyways, we had Bruce Haig bring, I don't know, 4 or 5 tandem truckloads. We had a 16 cubic yard dump truck. But he dumped it all on top of the hill. And then Doc had not only the backhoe, but he had a front end loader. Anyways, he trucked it down the hill. It was a steep hill too. And then he brought it right down the side of the river. And then he dumped it on the edge of the lake, or this is all running water. It's freezing like crazy, but it's still running water because it's all running water. And then Tony, he spread it, and keeping in mind that we had to have our 3 channels open. So he made a little hill in the middle with the rock. Then there's a flat gravelly area just ahead of where it starts to drop down. And we put all nice fresh limestone on top of that. And that really worked good. And that was a good thing. So that was fine. We finished that spring, or that winter. And the next spring, we went back to harvest the fish. And we noticed that the channels weren't quite right. You know, according to the memory and according to the pictures, and the water was going too fast. We didn't put enough big rock back inside. We managed to put more big rock in. We had a crew of about 35, 40 people. We all went up there. We had a chain gang. We had 35 people all in a row. This guy would pick it up, and 35 people later, I reestablished the channels. I mean, it was labor intensive. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We all got together and we did what had to get done. But that just didn't get there by itself. We had to get her done. And we did her. But it was a winter project, but it ended up like everything else. Sometimes you have to readjust because it's not quite right the first time. And that's what we did. We readjusted that rapids so that now, in 1982, when Judy and Jackie used to go over there, they would sit all night and maybe see 1 fish, maybe 2 fish. And they'd be there 14 nights to get enough fish just to fill. I think we only had 4 jars then. And fish were hard to catch, both on the lake and at the river. Now they can go over, and in 2 hours they can catch. Well, last year they got 11 females. This year they got 8 females within 2 hours and 20 males, and it's all over with. I mean, the brood stock has increased so much better. The best thing we've ever done was to spend our time and our money on rehabilitating the existing spawning beds. You got to have both together. You got to have good habitat, spawning habitat, and you got to have brood stock. So, having said that, I think we've got exactly what we started out to do in 1982. And this is 2007. This is 25 years later.
Maintaining the spawning beds. Even though the spawning beds have been done, it's important to keep them maintained. It's not just the responsibility of the program, but everyone on the lake and everyone who also uses the lake. By disturbing the rock shoreline in any way, like taking rock for shorelines or dock cribs, you are actually destroying the habitat for the spawning pickerel. The difference in water level between March and August can be a couple feet. Rocks that are dry and out of the water in August are actually submerged in April and can be perfect for spawning beds.
And all of us, we all took rock off that shoreline because it was easy to get. In the latter part of July and the first part of August, the water would always drop 18, 20 inches. And here's all these beautiful stones just there for the picking. So we would go by boat, and everybody would go, and pick up these stones that are just above the water line. But in the spring, when the pickerel are spawning, the stones that we were taking away were the spawning bed. The pickerel like to get as tight to shore as they can. Their back fin will be sticking out of the water that high. And we had, over the years, since 1924, when the first people started coming to the lake, we started removing, unaware of what we were doing, we started removing their prime spawning habitat. So anyway, through hatchery funding and our own local initiative, we advertised the fact that to everybody, don't take any rock off the shoreline. If you're going to build a dock, and if you need rock for your piers, or if you need rock to shore up your shoreline to keep it from eroding, the Pickerel Hatchery will sponsor all the costs of the rocks. And we've always had rock on hand here at the camp, both north and south side. So anybody that was building a stone crib or whatever they were building at their summer cottage, free of charge could come and get the rock from the Pickerel Hatchery, and that's the same on the south side. So this deterred most people from taking rock off the shoreline, and there's still some people that it was handier to get off the shoreline. But anyway, and that is probably the best thing that we can do to stabilize the shoreline, and to just keep people informed that, you know, like, don't take any rock off the shoreline.
The Catfish Derby. Along with other casual, very important donations, the main fundraising event to keep the program funded is the August long weekend Catfish Derby. This, to me, is the highlight of a lot of people's summer, including mine. This event also has lots of activities happening throughout the day. Minnow races, door prizes, 50-50 draws for several handcrafted items, the $100 catfish,
Okay, here's our first catfish coming in.
and of course, the socialization that comes with an event like this. After 3 years, I have definitely learned a thing or two about this program. When the hatchery group started the program, the eventual goal was to make the pickerel population self-sustaining. To get to this point, they knew they had to enhance the population. They did this by creating the hatchery and the pond. But this alone would only increase the population, not make the pickerel self-sustaining. In order to make the program a success, they knew they would have to improve and enhance the pickerel habitat. More specifically, the spawning beds. There are many different important aspects to fish enhancement programs, and this particular program has been recognized for their excellence several times. I learned that what works on this lake and with this program might not work elsewhere or with other programs. Every lake is different and unique, and even though the basic ideas are the same, everyone has to come up with their own system that works for them. What makes this program so successful is the combination of hard work, never-ending research, trial and error, all kinds of donations, whether it's on a monetary level or donating handcrafted items for draws. And of course, the volunteers, past and present. Over the last 25 years, there has been so many people that have contributed in so many different ways, there is no way possible to name them all and say thank you. But to every single person that has helped out in any way, whether it's from a small donation, donating their time, or even a helpful idea. Thank you. It's because of everyone that has gotten involved that our children, and hopefully generations to come, there will be pickerel around to enjoy. After 25 years, it truly has been for their future.